And Little Red Riding Hood just answers truthfully because she's so naive. And she actually gives the wolf direction to her grandmother's house. And this is, in a way, it's also the mother's fault because you have to be polite. The problem is Little Red Riding Hood does not know what situations she should be polite in. Not every situation, just situations in a civilized context. Alright, today I'm going to talk about Little Red Riding Hood. Everyone's heard about this fairy tale, everyone knows it. We got Little Red Riding Hood, the mother, the grandmother, the wolf, of course, and the hunter. And I just want to point out some very, very deep implications of that fairy tale. I mean, on the surface level, it's not that complicated. But in terms of the metaphorical meaning behind it, it's, to my mind, one of the deepest fairy tales that the Grimm brothers have put out there. So, with no further ado, let's get into it. All right. In German, the story is called Rotkäppchen, which means Red Hood. And it's very important. I'm going to come back to this point because as far as the metaphysical meaning of that fairy tale is concerned, Rotkäppchen is a very significant detail to take into consideration because Rotkäppchen does not only describe clothing, it goes way beyond that. All right, now let's get into the story. Everyone knows the story, but I want to go through it again because you have to really understand the German original because there's a lot of very, very significant terms in there. So the words really matter in that case. And so I'm just going to walk you through it. It's actually not very long. It's just like 1.5 pages long. So it's one of the shortest fairy tales that the Grimm brothers have written. So it starts like this. Es war immer eine kleine süße Dirne, die hatte jedermann lieb, der sie nur ansah, am allerliebsten aber ihre Großmutter, die wusste gar nicht, was sie alles dem Kinde geben sollte. Einmal schenkte sie mir ein Käppchen von rotem Samt, und weil ihm das so wohlstand und es nichts anderes mehr tragen wollte, hieß es nur noch das Rotkäppchen. Eines Tages sprach seine Mutter zu ihm, komm Rotkäppchen, da hast du ein Stück Kuchen und eine Flasche Wein, bring das der Großmutter hinaus, sie ist krank und schwach und wird sich daran laben. Mach dich auf, bevor es heiß wird, und wenn du hinauskommst, so geh hübsch, sittsam und lauf nicht vom Weg ab, sonst fällst du und zerbrichst das Glas und die Großmutter hat nichts. Und wenn du in ihre Stube kommst, so vergiss nicht Guten Morgen zu sagen und guck nicht erst in alle Ecken herum. So, it's very interesting. So they're saying, es war immer eine kleine süße Dirne. It depends on what region of Germany you are living in. Dirne, no one is using that word anymore to describe a girl because it also has the meaning of basically a prostitute. So it's kind of like a lewd woman. And so anyway, this already introduces some ambiguity into the story. Of course, the motif of the path, do not deviate from the righteous path, is also very important here because it introduces this whole complex of morals and the right way of civil conduct into the story. Anyway, so this Little Red Riding Hood, everyone loved her, but especially her grandmother just loves that kid. So she gives the kid a little red hood made of velvet. Very important. We go into the significance of these items later on. All right. And now the mother says, you have to bring this cake and a bottle of wine to your grandmother. She is sick. And so she can recover by drinking the wine and eating the cake. But be very careful because it's going to be hot outside. So, get on your way as soon as possible. And please stay on the path. So there's a path connecting the mother's house and the grandmother's house. This will be very important later on. Okay. Now, so she says, you have to be sittsam. Sittsam, this means moral. It's a term that no one's using anymore because this here is like 18th, 19th century German. And right now, we would just say moral, okay? Moralisch. Anyway, so do not deviate from that path, because once you deviate from the path, you will break the glass. I think she's referring to the wine bottle here. Or maybe she has given her a glass to take with her. I don't know, it's not in the text. But do not break the glass. Right, very important. And of course, when you get there, don't forget to say good morning and do not stare all across the room in all corners. No, it's just you have to behave very, very morally. Okay, now let's go on second paragraph. Ich will schon alles gut machen, sagte Rotkäppchen zur Mutter und gab ihr die Hand darauf. So she shakes her mother's hands and said, I will do everything that you asked me to do. I will do it well. All right. Die Großmutter aber wohnte draußen im Walde, eine halbe Stunde vom Dorf. So the mother's house and the grandmother's house are like a half hour apart. And wie ein Rotkäppchen in den Wald kam, beginnt eben der Wolf. So the moment she steps into the forest, the wolf shows up. All right. Rotkäppchen wusste nicht, dass das ein böses Tier war und fürchtete sich nicht vor ihm. She's not afraid of the wolf because she does not know that the wolf is evil. So her innocence kind of plays a trick on her because she just blindly trusts the wolf, right? So the wolf's asking her, and so guten Tag, Rotkäppchen, have a good day, Little Red Riding Hood, schönen Dank, Wolf, thank you, Wolf. And now he's asking her, wohin hast du für Rotkäppchen? Zur Großmutter. Was trägst du unter der Schürze? Kuchen und Wein. Gestern haben wir gebacken. Da soll sich die kranke und schwache Großmutter etwas zugute tun und sich daran stärken. Alright. Rotkäppchen, wo wohnt deine Großmutter? Noch eine gute Viertelstunde weiter im Wald. Unter den 3 großen Eichbäumen, da steht ihr Haus. Unten sind die Nusshecken. Das wirst du ja wissen, sagte Rotkäppchen. So, the wolf asks, where does your grandmother live? And Rotkäppchen, Little Red Riding Hood, she answers truthfully and says, yeah, you know, it's just like 15 minutes away from here. And so there's like 3 oak trees, and you know, underneath those oak trees, that's her house. But I'm sure you know about this. So she naively just answers all the wolf's questions. Now what happens is, so the wolf takes off, and he's just contemplating, wow, I mean, like, she looks tasty. Probably much better than the grandmother, who's old. And so now Little Red Riding Hood, she, you know, just goes on about her business, and the wolf just takes off to, go to the grandmother's house and eat her, basically. And so what happens is Little Red Riding Hood is distracted. Because before the wolf goes, he said, Rotkäppchen, sieh einmal die schönen Blumen, die ringsumher stehen. Warum guckst du die nicht um? Ich glaube, du hörst gar nicht, wie die Vögel so lieblich singen. Du gehst ja für dich hin, als wenn du zur Schule gingst, und es ist so lustig draußen in dem Wald. So the wolf tells her, you know, look at this beautiful forest, look at the flowers. Just listen to the birds, you know, they're singing so beautifully. I mean, you're just kind of like walking around like you're going to school. So just appreciate the beauty of nature. And of course, Little Red Riding Hood falls for this. I mean, the wolf, of course, he wants to gain some time to go to the grandmother's house and first eat her before Little Red Riding Hood gets there. So she is being deceived by the wolf's tactic. So, Rotkäppchen schlug die Augen auf, und als es sah, wie die Sonnenstrahlen durch die Bäume hin und her tanzten, alles voll schöner Blumen stand, dachte es, wenn ich der Großmutter einen frischen Strauß mitbringe, der wird ihr auch Freude machen. Es ist so früh am Tag, dass ich doch zur rechten Zeit ankomme, lief vom Wege ab in den Wald hinein und suchte Blumen. So, she looks at the flowers, you know, like the sun rays is illuminating everything. It looks so nice. And so then she starts picking flowers because she wants to bring some flowers to her grandmother. And so she's been distracted by the beauty of nature here. And so she leaves the path right now and goes into the forest, and she does exactly the one thing her mother told her not to do. She just goes into nature. So the wolf first gets to the grandmother's house, and so he knocks on the door, and the grandmother asks who's out there, and the wolf says, well, it's Little Red Riding Hood, right? So the grandmother trusts the wolf, tells him to come in, and he immediately eats the grandmother. And then because Little Red Riding Hood was distracted by the flowers. It takes her quite a while to get to her grandmother's house. And then she finally gets there, and then the famous dialogue between the wolf pretending her grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood ensues. So it goes like this. Hey Großmutter, was hast du für große Ohren, dass ich dich besser hören kann? Ei Großmutter, was hast du für große Augen, dass ich dich besser sehen kann? Ei Großmutter, was hast du für große Hände, dass ich dich besser packen kann? Aber Großmutter, was hast du für ein entsetzlich großes Maul, dass ich dich besser fressen kann? So, my God, why are your ears so big so I can hear you better? Why are your eyes so big so I can see you better? Why are your hands so big so I can grab you better? And why do you have such a big, horrible mouth so I can eat you? And then she gets eaten. The grandmother's already inside the wolf's belly. And so what happens is, wie der Wolf sein Gelüst gestillt hatte, legte er sich wieder ins Bett, schlief ein und fing an überlaut zu schnarchen. The wolf falls asleep and starts snoring. And then the hunter shows up. Der Jäger ging eben an dem Haus vorbei und dachte, wie die alte Frau schnarcht. Du musst doch sehen, ob etwas fehlt. And that old lady is snoring so loudly. I have to check on her if she's okay. Er tat in die Stube und wie er vor das Bett kam, so sah er, dass der Wolf darin lag. So the hunter gets into the house, sees the wolf lying in the bed, and of course he cuts his belly open and frees Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother. And then we all know they put stones in the wolf's belly. So the wolf just, he wants to jump up, but the stones in his belly are too heavy. So he falls over and dies. Interesting. So it says, aber die Steine waren so schwer, dass er gleich niedersank und sich tot fiel. Da waren alle drei vergnügt. All three of them were happy. Der Jäger zog dem Wolf den Pelz ab und ging damit heim. So the hunter skins the wolf. Die Großmutter aß den Kuchen und trank den Wein. The grandmother eats the cake, drinks the wine. Den Rotkäppchen gebracht hat und erholte sich wieder. Rotkäppchen aber dachte, du wirst dein Lebtag nicht wieder allein vom Wege ab in den Wald laufen, wenn dir es die Mutter verboten hat. So, Little Red Riding Hood thinks, I will never ever leave the path again and run into the forest because my mother says I'm not allowed to do this. So from now on, I will listen to what my mother tells me. Now, funny thing is, there's like a little appendix to the story, like an alternative ending. I'll point this out a bit later, but it kind of like emphasizes the whole point of the story, meaning do not leave the righteous path. And basically, you have to listen to that voice of reason, the voice of culture, so that you do not fall into the trap of nature and its seductive powers. Now, let's go through the motifs here. We have very, very important roles here, characters in the story. I'll point out one by one. All right. So, Little Red Riding Hood sets out to bring wine and cake to her grandmother's house. I capitalized the key words here and, just marked them in red because they all play a significant role in the story. Okay. So the mother warns her to stay on the path. Don't go into the forest. Yeah, so it's like path and forest. And these are two pairs of opposites, right? So the path, that's where you're supposed to be. The forest is the place you are not supposed to be. It's not your place. Why this is, I'm going to tell you in a minute. Okay. Now, the wolf appears, of course. And the wolf asks Little Red Riding Hood what she's up to. And Little Red Riding Hood just answers truthfully because she's so naive. And she actually gives the wolf direction to her grandmother's house. So it's just, and this is in a way, it's also the mother's fault because you have to be sittsam, you have to be moral, be honest, right? Say guten Morgen. So you have to say good morning. You have to be polite. The problem is Little Red Riding Hood does not know what situations she should be polite in. Not every situation. No, just situations in a civilized context, but not in a context where she is dealing with nature and let's say more primeval desires and so on, and danger that comes from the natural world. You have this distinction between culture and nature on the other hand. That's very important. So the wolf leaves, he just goes straight to the grandmother's house, and then of course Little Red Riding Hood is distracted by the flowers she sees, and so she leaves the path to get to the flowers. All right, now that's the problem, because these beautiful flowers are kind of very seductive, and she's distracted and seduced by nature's beauty. I go into this in more detail also in a minute. And so she picks the flowers. She wants a gift for her grandmother. Very important. We have this distinction. I mean, she's bringing wine and cake to the grandmother, and then she wants to pick flowers. I mean, both are basically gifts for the grandmother, but they're not the same kind of gift. Wine and cake are products of civilization. They're cultural artifacts. Flowers are a product of nature. So they have a different meaning here. All right. So it's always dangerous to bring nature into the realm of culture. I'll tell you more about this in a minute too. So Little Red Riding Hood goes back on the path, goes to her grandmother's house, but she already deviated from the path. So that means it's very hard to restore this cultural. So she has to get back into culture from nature again. But she's in a way already stained by nature. Okay, now she arrives at the house. Now the wolf pretends to be the grandmother, and we know Little Red Riding Hood trusts the wolf again, second time. So she's being deceived twice by the wolf, by nature. And of course the grandmother has already been eaten, and now the wolf eats Little Red Riding Hood as well. Luckily the hunter shows up and frees both of them, and together they kill the wolf. It's a joint effort to overcome this evil animal, this animalistic principle. Now let's talk about Little Red Riding Hood as the main character of the story. All right, so she's an adolescent standing in between civilization and nature. So culture and nature, and as a young human being, she is not completely accustomed to the values and habits of civilization. All right, so she's kind of like still quite easily distracted and enticed by nature. So she can still sway either way. And this is where culture comes in as the educating principle. So she has to be taught what separates culture from nature. And it's a learning curve. It's just an initiation process, right? Now, so in the beginning, I mentioned that she's being described as a Dilma, which is an ambiguous term in itself because it can mean a little girl or prostitute. So in that case, it's hard to say, but it could hint at the more voluptuous, animalistic side of human beings, human nature. So this could be deliberate. I think it was, because every sentence carries a very, very specific meaning. The Grimm's brothers did not waste a single word. So every word is where it's supposed to be. Now, Little Red Riding Hood is enticed and seduced by the beauty of nature. She just gives in to that beauty. And so in a way, I mean, she's just innocent, naive, because she's a kid, she's an adolescent. And she does not know how to distinguish good from evil yet, right? And so what she does is she, instead of listening to her mother's words, she still deviates from the path of civilization. So the path in itself, that's like the narrow path of civilization. It's within nature. And I'm going to talk about the topography of the fairy tale in a minute, but she leaves this path. So she leaves the righteous path and steps off into nature. And this is where danger lurks. So the wolf himself, I mean, he disguises himself as the grandmother, This is nature impersonating culture in order to deceive a human being. So you cannot trust the natural world. That's a warning here. And so nature can appear civilized, but it's not. It's going to devour you, right? So this is like the core of this of the fairy tale. Yeah, it's always treacherous and dangerous. It's very interesting. I mentioned in the beginning, like the German name of the fairy tale is Rotkäppchen. No, Rotkäppchen is actually a mushroom, right? It's the fly agaric, it's the Amanita muscaria. And I will point out the metaphysical dimension of the fairy tale at the end of this video. So that's the thing. Let's say, as a drug, of course, that fly agaric, the Amanita muscaria, can be used to leave the realm of civilization and step into the realm of nature. And but this is like where danger occurs. It becomes dangerous because you enter a world that you cannot control, but that controls you. And of course, you can also die. Okay, yeah. No, it's because, I mean, if you overdo it, of course. But like the Amanita muscaria mushroom, basically it was used, you know, for millennia, especially in the 18th century. It kind of like had like a real revival in folk culture and also in literature, especially in Romanticism, right? It was like the realm of hallucinations, of frenzy, of craziness, people losing their minds. So it was just this very dangerous other dimension that you can enter, but sometimes you cannot get out of it again without outside help. That's very important. So what Little Red Riding Hood does also, I mean, she in a way opens up culture for nature to seep into it by talking to the wolf. I mean, of course, we all know wolves don't talk, but it's very important because in that case, and the wolf can also mean something else. I'm going to point this out later. But so it's just, it cannot harm you if you don't let it harm you. Right, but if you let it in, if you open yourself up to it, then you have a problem, right? Because once it's in there, it's very hard to get out. And this is like, I've pointed this out in other videos, the Seabold video and so on. I mean, you already carry nature inside of you because of human nature. Because human beings, accept all their efforts to keep out nature out of our culture. They're still connected to the natural world. And the key is just not to let this natural world take over. So you have to keep it out of civilization as much as you can. So in the end, Little Red Riding Hood promises that she will never leave the path of civilization again. And so she has internalized the voice of reason, her mother's voice, which in this case stands for the voice of civilization itself. Now let's talk about the wolf. So the wolf himself is a representation of nature. And so he personifies the chaotic principle of nature. He is the antagonist of civilization in that fairy tale. And it's also very interesting. I mean, he's a talking wolf. So there's also this dimension of the homo homini lupus, that old like man to man is wolf. Right? I mean, so basically man is man's worst enemy. And so it's just the wolfish principle. If you're not careful, the wolf will devour you. And he always lurks in the shadows. You can go back to the Hesse videos I posted online. And also like the Jungian principle of the shadow, right? Because that's basically what it is. So the shadow is everywhere. It's your animal nature. It also haunts you and stalks you. And so the wolf himself, then he's also kind of like, he's part of nature, yes, but the fact that he's talking actually also makes him like cross over into civilization. Right, so it's very dangerous because it's like a revenant in a way. Now, he also represents like the seductive sexual power of nature, the animalistic aspect of nature, and also of human beings, because human beings are easily falling for this. And so this is what happens with Little Red Riding Hood as an adolescent. Now, of course, another meaning of the wolf here is the literal meaning of there being wolves in the forests. I mean, at that time, the last wolf was killed on German soil in 1909. And so actually, there was a real danger of contracting rabies. You know, people get bitten by wolves, by dogs, by whatever kind of animals. And it was very, very widespread at that time. And there was nothing you can do, of course, against it, right? So, I mean, that was a death sentence. And so the danger of contracting rabies and of dying from it, that was a real threat that people were aware of. And the wolf also represents men in general. Little Red Riding Hood is an adolescent girl. So, I mean, she's discovering her sexuality, and she will also discover men then. Right, and this is where it becomes dangerous, because men are also predators in that case. It's a warning, okay? Don't fall for these men. Don't be too honest, because their intentions are not good. They're going to devour you. So, it has very many different layers of metaphors. Now let's talk about the mother. Now the mother is the guiding principle. Red Riding Hood. So in a way, she's the superego in the story. And so she's the voice of civilization. Like, she's basically guarding all these principles that civilization is based upon. Like all these rituals that are important to keep up civilization and to also protect it against nature, the chaos of nature. So she represents order. She just reminds Little Red Riding Hood, don't forget to say good morning, and you know, just be moral, stay on the right path. And so in a way, so her words are shaping Little Red Riding Hood's life, just to prepare her to become part of civilization, to grow into culture. So it's like the older generation guarding civilization and passing it on to the younger generation. It's a generational effort. In a way, it's a generational contract. So it just ensures that civilization can continue, right? So it's in a way like the voice of the mother is the voice of reason in a world of chaos. They're surrounded by forests. But in that narrow realm of civilization, these guiding words spoken by Little Red Riding Hood's mother, they guarantee that this system of culture is not invaded by nature. The grandmother. The grandmother loves Little Red Riding Hood the most. She gives her the red hood. It's made of velvet, very, very valuable at that time, of course. It just displays how much she appreciates her granddaughter. And grandmother's sick. That means like a generation is disappearing. All right, so it's like a piece of culture that's in the past is slowly fading away. But through cultural items like wine and cake, this old fading culture can be reinvigorated. It's the grandmother's wisdom that actually enables to. So it's the grandmother who connects the civilized realm of Little Red Riding Hood and her mother's realm too. I mean, because they both have their origin in her grandmother, basically. And so she's also a source of knowledge because she knows all the core values of civilization, and she kind of like administers them, and she keeps them. But then she, of course, because she's fading, like her culture, like as a representative of culture, she's sick and slowly fading away, and that's why she's also falling for nature. So she's being consumed, devoured by the wolf, by nature itself. Because in the end, that's where you go. You go back to nature where you come from, right? So this cultural aspect, it is not forever. It has to be passed on generation by generation, but it's also very, very fragile. Now, by consuming the cake and the wine, the grandmother recovers because she's literally taking in culture again and reinforcing the cultural element that she herself stands for too. And so this consumption of culture, probably ingesting cultural products, just also strengthens the culture that she stands for. The hunter. Now the hunter is a very interesting figure, although he just shows up out of nowhere and just like 3 sentences where he appears. The hunter, he moves in between the realm of nature and the realm of culture. So in a way, he's the antagonistic principle opposed to nature because he's controlling nature and he's making sure that nature does not invade culture. He's defending culture against nature. So he's controlling the forest and all the wildlife in it. And so he constantly keeps nature in check and defeats it when he has to. And he's the outside help that comes to save Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother from the wolf. By cutting the wolf's belly open, he frees them, and then they together kill the wolf. Interestingly enough, they kill the wolf with stones, with our products of nature too. And in the end, like the wolf, in the end, the hunter, he skins the wolf. So it's also very interesting. So he takes the wolf's skin and turns it into a product of civilization. This is literally turning nature into culture. The forest. The forest itself is a very important motif. Almost every fairy tale has something to do with the forest. But in this case, it's very significant. Now, so it's like the realm opposed to civilization. This is the natural realm. It's just the realm of chaos. It's full of trees, you can't really see very far. You lose your way, you walk around in circles, you don't know where to go. There's like lots of strange sounds, it's animals, it's very dangerous. You can't run because you stumble. So it's, in a way, it's a nightmarish environment. Now, so it's unpredictable and dangerous. And it's constantly growing. And so once there's a path in the forest, the trees and plants, they constantly overgrow the path again and make it disappear. So culture is just swallowed by nature constantly if you don't maintain it properly. So it's a constant struggle against the ever-growing natural world. Now, so it's also like if you go to the forest, like a dense forest, and you have trees and rows of trees, and probably just like just not even like growing in a specific order, and you cannot look very far. Like if your view is blocked, which also means you cannot plan ahead. So this is just something. It's just short term. It's like I find something to eat, and that's it, and I can survive another day. Find something to eat again. But it's not like the civilized process of, now, where do I see myself in 3 years? No, that's actually like when you step on the path and you can see very far ahead. And then okay, I'm walking down this path toward a certain goal, destination. But in the forest, you can't, because you also tend to get lost in there. So it's a realm of deception and also a realm of danger because, as we've seen, the wolf lives in there too. The path. Now, it's a connection between Little Red Riding Hood's home and the grandmother's house. In itself, the path represents civilization. It's a metaphor for the continuation of civilization through a generational connection. Like Little Red Riding Hood and her mother are connected to her grandmother by the path. And this is like the secure realm within nature. This is the realm of culture that goes through the forest. And this is also why the mother says, don't step off the path. Don't leave the path, stay on the path, because this is culture. It's like this enclosed system. It sets its borders against the realm of nature. As long as you stay on the path, you're safe. And as soon as you get off the path, you put yourself in danger. You don't know what's going to happen. The items. So first of all, the red hood. It's made of velvet, and it's very, very valuable. Then we have wine and cake as products of culture. And so all these things like the Little Red Hood, the wine, the cake, that's all cultural products. Interestingly, they all come from nature though. So basically what they do is they take things out of nature, natural things, through a process of civilization, turn it into cultural items. It's very important to go through this process to turn nature into culture. Now, so it's basically cultural achievements within the realm of nature. And so that's how you do it. I mean, and this is you have to turn nature into culture, into civilization by a certain process, and in order to make it part of human civilization. And the Belgian anthropologist, the Belgian thinker Levi Strauss, he wrote this book, The Raw and the Cooked, where he distinguishes between cooked foods and raw foods. Like honey, that's not a cultural product because you can just collect it and eat it like this. It doesn't need any processing. But let's say for meat, you don't need raw meat. You just cook it and turn it into a cultural product. So, because of course, how do you cook things? You need fire, which in itself, controlled fire, is a representation of culture in itself. And so this is very important to turn nature into culture. There's a process involved. Now, when Little Red Riding Hood gets into the forest to pick some flowers, flowers are also a product of nature. So it's in terms of being a gift for a grandmother, they did not go through this purification process of turning nature into culture. It's just very direct, very immediate. They just pick the flowers, pluck them out, and then just give it to her. In that way, it does not really carry any cultural significance as it did. The flowers don't really carry any cultural significance as a gift. The topography. I'll show you this illustration. This is a map, the basic map of the fairy tale's environment. So the green circle, that represents the realm of nature, and I wrote nature in wolf. And then we have the grandmother's house on top, GRMO, and then the path connecting the grandmother's house and the house of Little Red Riding Hood at RH. So you can see it's this system within nature. All around these houses and the path, that's where nature is. And so as long as you move between these two houses and you keep on the path, nothing can happen. But if you step off the path, then danger is imminent. So we have these two realms of civilization, which is like the two houses, and then the path is also like a connecting principle that also represents civilization. Now, outside of this realm, that's like the brutal forces of nature raging there, waiting to consume every individual who steps off this path. Now, in a way, this civilized ground is sacred ground. And outside of this sacred ground, that's where Pan rules. It's the realm of panic and chaos. And so, of course, if you're not careful, as we see with a wolf, nature will always infringe on civilization. It finds a way to get in there. It can be deceptive. It can be very, very brutal and direct. But in that case of Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf is working with tricks, trying to impersonate culture in order to get himself as nature into the realm of culture. And this is what it kind of comes back to. That's this constant struggle between culture and nature. Culture and nature. So it's a primeval constellation. Human beings have always struggled to keep nature out of culture. So culture and nature are a pair of opposites. So, although, of course, culture always exists within the realm of nature, but it tries to distinguish itself from it as a system that sets its borders against nature to keep it out as much as it can. But the problem is that nature constantly seeps into culture, and of course is always present in culture because of human nature, because humans are obviously a part of nature with all its aspects, animalistic desires, whatever. Nature itself, as the fairy tale teaches us is deceptive, it's also beautiful. But the lure of nature's beauty is very dangerous because it gets in between a human being and the cultural realm. So the human being gives in to the seduction of nature and forgets and the value of culture and that culture is where human beings belong and not nature. So culture itself has to be maintained by rules. So it's like, rituals. And it has to be maintained throughout the generations in order to continue. Otherwise, it just stops. Right? And then as soon as it's interrupted, nature seeps in, and this is it for culture. So then nature takes over again. It's a very, very fragile system, and this chain of generations trying to maintain culture can be interrupted very easily. So it can just go back to nature in a heartbeat. Now, I just talked about the metaphysical dimension a bit, like about the Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric, that mushroom. And so this is also, just let's remember that the fairy tales of the Grimm's brothers, they were written during, German Romanticism, and they were obsessed with the spiritual world, which is also a part of the natural world, opposed to the rational world of the Enlightenment. So it's a psychedelic realm. It's a realm of hallucinations. It's the realm of people going crazy, losing their minds. And so this is like when someone opens themselves up for nature, to nature. And then nature can just get in uncontrolled. And so it's always like this warning again. So although we have this rationality that the Enlightenment teaches, but still we're always highly in danger of succumbing to the natural world because of its allure. It's just very appealing. So nature cannot be kept out of civilization. It's always there. And so the civilized rationality has no jurisdiction in the realm of nature. The natural world has its own rules, but these rules are not fixed rules. It's chaotic rules. They are subject to change, and it's very hard to predict the outcome. The only thing that you can predict is that it's unpredictable. So the story has an alternative ending, which is very interesting. What it basically says is that Little Red Riding Hood went to the grandmother again. And then the wolf was knocking again, or another wolf, but this time she had learned her lesson, and they just kept the wolf outside, and they did not fall for the tricks of nature, the natural world. So everyone got a little wiser at the end. I mean, it really doesn't need that alternative ending there. So the conclusions are, in a way, so the whole story is a rite of initiation for Little Red Riding Hood. She's learned her lesson. So it's kind of a victory of culture over nature. And it just reinforces the distinction. So it reinforces the distinction between culture and nature, and also emphasizes that you have to keep nature out of culture at all costs. Otherwise, it will just be in there, and you cannot even tell, because it works with tricks. It's appearing there in disguise. It just sneaks in. And then, once it's in there, it's too late. You're going to be consumed by it. So, these boundaries between nature and culture have to be kept very, very safe and firm. Always. And it's also a warning against the wolfish nature of man. And so, reminding everyone that we carry nature in ourselves all the time and always. Now, it's also, once you deviate from the path of culture, and you also deviate from that lineage, the generational lineage, and the wisdom that is carried on by every generation, then you expose yourself to the arbitrary powers of nature. It makes you weak. And so you you lose your civilized nature too. And sometimes when you lose your way, the only thing that can help you is someone from the outside. You cannot do it yourself. You find yourself in the belly of the beast and you cannot free yourself. And then it takes another member of culture to pull you out of there. And so this is very important, so that culture reinforces culture, and nature always seeps into culture and tries to harm it from the inside, to consume it. So that means, in the end, only culture can control and defeat nature, although can it really ever defeat nature? Maybe not, because nature is just omnipresent. So thank you very much for watching. See you next time.